Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Prabhupada Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Bolo. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Bolo. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Bolo. Jayo Radha Shama Sundar, Radha Shama Sundar Radhe. Jayo Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava Radhe. Jayo Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Shyam Sundar ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Madhav ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktavinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Bhimanandi Hare Hare Bol. Hare Krishna. So welcome everyone to the third part of the seminar on Krishna Conscious Parenting. Thank you all so much for coming and sticking with us for this third and final part. Just as a reminder, yesterday we covered two sections of the seminar. Books are the basis. First, purity is the force was first, which was basically describing creating a positive home environment that is conducive to raising our children as good devotees and also strong intellectually and academically. And then the second section was books are the basis, and that focused on specifically doing a Bhagavatam-centered education for our children and providing Bhagavatam study as a regular feature of their lives, whether they are going to school or Gurukul or learning at home. And so Those two things, and we talked a little bit about other subjects as well, although the focus was on how we can get both spiritual and academic strength from the study of Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we have the third and the final and the shortest section of the three, which is called Preaching of the Essence. Preaching is the Essence. And this one covers things like discipline, social life, outreach activities, good communication skills, and what are otherwise called extracurricular activities. Although in the way we discuss it, they're not extracurricular, but actually a very important part of the curriculum. And then we'll end with some resources that are available. The reason this section is a bit shorter is because in the final part of the seminar, we like to provide plenty of time for questions. Questions about this section, but also questions that may have piled up from yesterday's seminar as you've had a chance, hopefully, to sleep over it and reflect on some of the things. And finally, questions that may relate to those who are actually homeschooling their children. So we'll have time for that, so please make note of whatever questions you might have. And the plan is to go till 1 o'clock today or just a little after that with today's session. Just to kind of recap or a little reminder of, I hope one of the things that you noticed from yesterday's seminar is that nothing that we were discussing in the seminar up to this point, or even for the rest of it, is highly unusual. As for any devotee who's been around the movement for some time, these principles that we're discussing in yesterday's seminar should all be very familiar. The question is basically just in terms of our conviction in being able to apply that in the lives of our children, right? So even though we know that these are the principles that we follow, sometimes it becomes difficult to apply them because we don't have we're a little afraid of what the consequences might be and how this might affect their future prospects or so on. And the hope is in this seminar to show how when we take what is basically the foundations of Krishna consciousness as we receive them from Srila Prabhupada, and we apply them diligently in the lives of our children, but also appropriately to their level and their understanding, that is, we apply them for the children in mind in particular, then the results are wonderful. And this is because the process itself, as given to us by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through the Guru Parampara, and specifically by Srila Prabhupada, that process itself is perfect. So that's kind of the idea or the hope behind what we've presented so far, and then what is to come. So with that, we'll begin with preaching as the essence.
Hare Krishna. Like I mentioned yesterday, a lot of our home education was not really in the home, but outside the home. So because, that's a lot of the education does go outside the home. We don't want to give our children just bookish knowledge. Even for children who are going to school, or we want to give them knowledge of the world around them. And the best way to do that would be, what Prabhupada wanted us to do is teach others. And so a tree is known by its fruit. In other words, you can actually judge what you have taught your children, how you have trained your children by the way the child can present it to others. If there is a chance where the child is able to articulate what he knows as a devotee, what he's learned or some part of the philosophy as a devotee, then you know that the child actually has assimilated or understood his identity as a devotee. Okay, so many people, many parents, and even I was thinking like that, how, children have to learn. In the initial stages they have to learn, and when they go out into the world, that's when they hold a job, they teach others, and so many other things. But actually, teaching is a type of learning. Actually, it's a very powerful form of learning. And a lot of you may have that experience. If you had to explain something to somebody, then you know that subject matter in and out. Okay? If you've ever given a class or you've presented something in school, you know that what you have to present, you know it in and out. You have to study it really well. Why? because people will have questions, challenges, and so many. So you have to be prepared. So you know these things better. So if children are given that opportunity where they can do that, then especially in the field of Krishna consciousness, if they are able to go out and share Krishna with others, then you know that they are very well situated as a devotee. They have that faith. And I have to tell you this one example that my youngest son, when he was 13 years old, at that time, Philadelphia, they started this Bhakti Shastri course. And this was only for a short time. Unfortunately, we don't have any for our children, where our children can go somewhere in America. You have to go to Mayapur, Vrindavan, really hard, to take our children for 3 months at a time over there. So they had it, and I grabbed that opportunity. And so my youngest son was 13 at that time. I sent him to spend 3 months there to do a Bhakti Shastri course. And he did it. He did it. And then after that, he came home, and the devotees, they asked him to give a seminar on the, how many chapters we have to do? So they asked him to give a seminar on the first 10 chapters of Nectar of Devotion, whatever he learned over there. He was very nervous. It was a small temple at that time, and we were encouraging our children. And he was spending all his time, preparing for this seminar. And by the time that the time came for the seminar, he was well prepared. And his experience after that was that he knew the chapters of Nectar of Devotion better when he had to present it to others than what he had learned in the Bhakti Shastra. You see? So when we give our children the chance to do these things, in bhakti vrikshas or temples, then they actually feel confident as a devotee and they know their philosophy really. Then, rather than just sitting in class and just taking in all the time, but giving the chance to express them. So this is the experience in preaching. And when they were very little, because we had a center, and the idea was to make more devotees, because we were, like I told you yesterday, we were totally isolated. If we wanted association, we had to give association and get association like that. In other words, we had to make devotees. And so we found ourselves really going out there for any event and presenting Krishna consciousness, trying to give out books. So we started these school programs. And so when they were really young, like 5, 6 years old, so we did programs. We called libraries and preschools and places like that, daycares, because there the children were small and we had no experience in doing all these. So we called them and asked them if they would like us to present Krishna consciousness at their place. And because Boise is very culturally starved, there's not much diversity there, you see. So they were always looking out, but it's a very, very, people are really in the mode of goodness. People are very open-minded over there, but they had no, exposure to other cultures. So they kind of welcomed that. So it was a nice way for us to get in. And then we would take our children and we would, like for half hour, 45 minutes, and consciousness, like that. And dividing it into different things. Initially, we were kind of fumbling our way, and so we would try to make it like, divided into sections like food, how people eat food in India, music, geography. We would divide it into sections and present it, and then we would open out for questions. And towards the end, we would have the Krishna art book, and we would show them pictures of Krishna and give them stories. And that's what I was telling you yesterday. But in all this presentation, there was always chanting, some philosophy, because as soon as you have food, we talk about vegetarianism, why we are vegetarians, why the cow is sacred, and, practically everything of Krishna consciousness would come into that. And the kids were satisfied, the children, and the children would participate in small ways. Like they would, they would do the music, they would, give out prasadam. So they were listening. They couldn't do anything, but they were observing what we were doing. And then later on, as they got older, we started going to elementary public schools, and we didn't know how to get in because they're really tough. I mean, they don't combine religion, education, right? So we found a way to get in by contacting all these Indians who came to the temple. The children are going to public schools, and we asked them if they would ask the teachers, if we could present Krishna consciousness, it was a different way to get in, and it worked. And they were, because they were coming to the temple, they were open, they were friendly. So we got in this way, and it was a little tougher because people are. But nevertheless, when we, as soon we started chanting and presenting the philosophy, we would open it for questions, and it was always a success. We would leave books for the teachers, and we would have different items like peacock feather, Bhagavad Gita, to show them. And so this way and the children were learning more and more. Like, then we got them, as they got older, then they would start making small presentations about how they dress. They were able to speak and give some small presentation. Dress. They would talk about the chanting, what it means, and all those things. So they were getting bolder and bolder. As they watch you, they become very more and more comfortable. And gradually, when Radhika was 12 and my younger one was 10, I decided that they're ready to speak to their own show. So that was the first, and we called a private high school called Bishop Kelly, and they were a Catholic high school, and the teacher was very happy to do that. And Radhika went for his first engagement, and it was. Anyway, it was a very amazing experience at that time, the first entrance into public speaking. But it was not without challenges. We spent tons of time preparation, preparing for the classes. And one thing I remember, it was so wonderful just to spend time with each other, practicing a mantra on the harmonium, how to play it, prasadam, making prasadam together. So these things brought us together really close because we had things to do together. We had to, there was an event to prepare for, and it always broke the monotony of life. How you go to school every day is the same old thing. You kind of break it up, and and children get very excited, and they think, and this kind of presentation gave them so much faith and confidence in the identity of devotees, much more than anything else. Because you actually get a chance to speak out. And especially when the audience would clap in the end, they would feel like, wow, this is like success, right? You feel, you feel people have accepted you as devotees, and it did a lot. Because you see, what happens is, if you don't give our children this opportunity to speak out and present Krishna to others, so gradually as time goes and they become teenagers, then you see they're losing their confidence. Because there's so much distraction and peer pressure coming, so they start losing their confidence, they start withdrawing. And you see these kids, instead of coming right in front of the temple, they're way at the back. They still come, but the confidence is, they're losing that confidence. And when I go for seminars, the parents always say that, I feel like I'm losing them. What am I doing wrong? They were not like that when they were growing up. My spiritual master, whenever you present him a wonderful child who's so Krishna consciousness, he would always say, okay, let's see, like, okay, they're Krishna conscious now, but if we can keep it up. So these are the challenges, especially with older children. We can really help in this matter, giving them this sense of confidence, especially when they were doing these high school classes. It was just the sense of that confidence of being able to handle older kids, the challenges and acceptance, and when the response is wonderful, it goes a long way. It goes a long way for confidence. So, and then as they got older, not only giving presentations in high school, but as word got around, they started inviting us. So we found ourselves going to private schools where we would sometimes participate. Like, for example, one school had a India Day for like a whole week, and we were presenting Krishna consciousness at different grade levels every day, 5 days. And we went from one classroom to another. And one time there was a huge event with 400, there were 400 children in school, and and we brought all the congregation people for making, giving all the children the dots, what do you call them? Gopi dots, yeah. And tilak and sadam, and it was just such a wonderful time. One time, the public school, they invited us to do a program in 14 schools. It was part of the they got federal funding for, um, for opening cultural awareness among children, and they paid us for that, $1,000 for doing that. So it was one of those things that if you inquire and you find out, then you can actually end up really, getting your children more and more involved in this. And invariably, every time where we felt that the crowd is going to be very conservative, happily surprised, because they ended up just being so open about it, asking so many open questions, and we were speaking directly about Krishna lifestyle. And so we realized that we just keep a standard program. This is what we do, and it always ended up a success. I can't even remember one program where we came home and we thought, oh, it wasn't so good. Every one of them. This school that I was, Radhika just reminded me, the school that we were going to, high school where they were speaking, we were doing it semester after semester. You can imagine, twice a year for years we were doing that. And one time there was a senior devotee visiting Boise. So we thought, oh, this is such a wonderful idea. Now he can present that. We told the teacher that actually this time there will be another person. And she was very upset. She was adamant. She says, no, we want your children because we want to show that how the youth in your movement can speak so well and they know the philosophy so well. It wasn't about them. It was the fact that she was so surprised that people in our movement they know so much and they're able to present children, you know. So she refused. She said no, they're going to come. And then later on, she got so inspired doing that. She had all of Prabhupada's books in her library. And then she started bringing the students to the temple. She got so confident, and they would come and go through the entire program, of arti and chanting and class. And then when the time came for chanting during class, then we would have everyone sing the Maha Mantra, all the students by themselves. So she would lead in that. She would, as a teacher, she would chant the mantra, so she would encourage other students. And she was a Christian and everything. So it was very nice. And so these are the things how we can affect other people's lives through our children. And this way, children become a part of our effort to spread Krishna consciousness. One thing I may not have mentioned yesterday, that we always have to make children a part of our spiritual activities. Anything we do, whether we are cooking, whether we are doing deity worship, whether we are preaching, children should always be part of it, because then they feel part of it. Otherwise, they feel left out. Suppose we do our seva, but the children, we keeping them, just out of trouble, where they can just play around and do their thing. Then they just don't feel part of it, and gradually they will lose it. You see. But if you draw the children in and you make them a part of your every activity, then they feel very enthused. And this is really what we did. Like anything we did. I didn't do anything if my children were not part of it. You see? Whether we were, it was deity worship, or whether it was, going out on book distribution. We would go out and book. The university there was only a block away. So that was a nice thing. I would put them in one was too young. Gopal was only 2 and he was 4. I would put him in a stroller, Gopal, and he would walk, and we would just walk over and spend a couple hours distributing books. And even though they couldn't talk, but they had a chance to give out the books, hand the cards. So they were really, they felt, very enthused. So we can always, try to do that. You see in many, many places, like we did a seminar in Chowpatty, and they were saying how parents, they do so much service, but children don't feel part of it, and they were asking for help, how to make the children involved. So what happens is we become so inspired to become devotees, we forget that the children need also that, inspiration. And this is the right time to give them, because if we give them at this age, then they will naturally become very empowered devotees, later on. They'll become very good preachers and very good, and so even for festivals, we'll talk about that, I think, later on.
So just to add a little bit, which is that alongside the confidence that children get in becoming devotees, That's actually a very important point. Yesterday we were speaking to a devotee family, and they were talking about how they had done one school program like this. And this small child, after he had come back from the program, he was so, confident. The confidence level as a devotee increased when seeing everyone clapping and cheering and being so happy. And that's so important for children to get positive reinforcement very early on that, oh, it's actually, I can be proud to be a devotee of Krishna, that people will be happy if I'm a devotee of Krishna. That way, when they grow older, as they grow older, it will be natural that they'll also meet people who will not respect them for being devotees, who will laugh at them or snicker at them or spit at them, but they'll be able to handle it because they've received so much positive reinforcement for the fact that they're devotees. They've been in so many circumstances where people really want them, where they cheer them, where they clap for them, and that builds their confidence and identity as devotees. So just to highlight this point that it's a very nice way to make sure that our children not only become devotees, but they stay devotees as they grow up and they develop their own sense of identity, that Krishna is always part of that identity, is always at the center of it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that you develop so many good skills as a result of this. So in terms of public speaking and communication and marketing and all these skills that are so useful in every facet of life. When they go to college, then you have to do like a presentation in class, practically every course you do one presentation. When you go to work, then you have to convince a team of your ideas, present your ideas. All of these skills they learn naturally through Krishna consciousness. So the wonderful thing about doing a Krishna conscious parenting system is that you get, if you do the spiritual, the material automatically follows, right? This has been a theme in this past couple of days where we talk about, well, if you study Bhagavatam, your intellectual skills automatically develop. If you do deity worship, you automatically learn qualities of discipline and self-control. If you do preaching, you automatically learn good communication, public speaking skills, and so on. So the key point is, if you do the spiritual, you automatically get the material and you get it very well. On the other hand, if you focus on the material, then you will lose the spiritual. It will not come automatically. You'll lose the character, the good values, the connection with Krishna, and you will also end up losing the material simply because everything material is temporary, right? So it's a lose-lose situation if we just focus on the material side of things. And if we focus on the Krishna consciousness side of things, then it becomes a win-win situation where you win your spiritual life, you also win your material life at the same time. There's no loss in that endeavor.
Just one point, I was thinking that how it really does start at home, in other words, in the temple. So when the children participate in different things, they get speaking opportunities, right? So the training really begins here in the temple. You know, when they do all these different activities, they do volunteer work, and so it gives them a chance to show their leadership qualities, and that can be extended outside, you know. But it's not enough. It's not enough just to keep it within the temple. One has to reach out. One has to go in order to be able to relate with the world. We want to expose them to the outside world, but like Radhika said yesterday, in a protected way. You know, we don't want to leave them exposed outside without us, you know. We want to be part of that picture. And this way they're getting to experience the outside world, but in a way where they're confident, you know. So once we've developed that, when the time comes when they have to fly the nest, then they're ready, you see. Like many people say that how in order to, you have to have them experience everything. They have that argument, you know, like that you have to leave the children and let them experience. No, not so early. The time will come when they have to experience, but this is early. So, and another one point that I missed is that besides the school programs, you can take part in different things like interfaith events, you know, which is very nice, you know, like Thanksgiving and Christmas events the city holds, and they invite different religions to come and participate and do a little bit. And used to be only 5 minutes long, just 5 minutes long, and they would just barely be able to recite a shloka and sing the Maha Mantra for 5 minutes. But it was well worth it. And we would have to sit there for like 2 hours, but it was well worth it because that experience and that exposure, you're giving Maha Mantra to others, it has a very strong effect on the children, you know. So these events, there's plenty of it around here. You have to go and seek it out and find out, check the city calendar, see what's going on, take the help of other devotees, make it into a small group, go together. Even for these school programs, we had nobody there, so we had to go alone. Because in Seattle, they took this up. A lot of temples have tried these school programs for children. Now we know that adults do all this, right? We know that adults go preaching to the, but children, generally we think, no, we can't do that, right? So Seattle and other cities tried this method, and they actually, a lot of families would get together, they'd take the children, and it would be so nice. They would tell me, how these children would dress up, and the girls would dress up in saris, put tilak, and it used to be very attractive. And it would be such a success. They would end up distributing books and prashadam and talking about Krishna. I remember when we used to come back home, it was like we were exhilarated, totally, exhilarated from just preaching and giving Krishna to others. So, and home programs are also a very good way to expose children, when you open your homes. Such a wonderful way to give them that confidence, because opening your own homes is not the same thing as going somewhere. When you open your own home to Krishna consciousness, then there's so much you have to do, and children become a very strong part of that, because they have to be in the front lines, right? They have to, we end up asking them to do a kirtan, we end up, maybe giving a short presentation, because we want them, to excel, to take leadership roles. So they're thrown into that, by circumstance, and that does wonderful effect on them. So festivals and temple programs, I talked a little bit about it, and my husband was really the inspiration for us in this section. He was really strong on observing all the festivals in a very grand way. So, and we, like I said, we started out just with our family there, and so, everything that we did was ourselves. So but because he wanted to do it extensively, we had a wonderful experience because, even a lot of our homeschooling was based on these, our study would be dovetailed to, learning about the festival. Like if we had a festival, then 2 weeks prior to that, we stopped our usual homeschooling, and it would be geared towards learning about the festival, learning about the, if it's a Krishna Janmashtami, then reading stories about Krishna's birth. And so the whole mood changed, the whole learning process became very exciting because this was away from the usual, and they would learn so many practical skills, cleaning and decorating and organizing, and then of course drama was such a big part of it. Like we would take the opportunity to do a drama for every event because we saw it as a big preaching event. Like we would attract the children of congregation members through drama, because every parent likes their children to be in drama. So this would be a big preaching method. So by engaging the children in the drama, they would become more Krishna conscious. But the children, my children would get the chance to write the script. Who would write the script, right? So I would say, well, you have to write the script. We have no script. And that would encourage them to develop their writing skills, their skills for being directors, directing the skills, and acting. And this would go for weeks. And you can imagine the Krishna, the mood, the consciousness is so tuned on Krishna at that time, right? So it would collectively do so many things at one time, and children, actually, especially young children like teenagers, they really get a chance to express themselves in a very dramatic way. How young teenagers want to be so dramatic, and they have to express their emotions, and this is how you see in society, they express it in horrible ways, right? And because that need is there of being a leader and expression and all these things. And so that's why you see how Krishna consciousness is so dynamic, because everything is here. That need can be satisfied within this field of drama, because young people can come and take roles which are very expressive, like being Lord Nishingadev or, Hiranyakashipu, and very, so a lot of children in the temple, they benefited from there. There was one American family, and the young, they were teenagers, and they were participating and acting out and just satisfying all their, needs of expression and being, bold. And so in other words, everything is here, and festivals especially can be a very good way of inculcating Krishna consciousness in our children. Okay, in a real practical way, festivals are a chance for for children to express their love for Krishna in a practical way, right? We are studying, we're reading, but how do you express your love for Krishna? When you actually do something for Krishna, right? And festivals are the chance where children can do something, they can express their love for Krishna, in a very practical way. I'm sure some of you may remember growing up in India, right? And observing these things. I particularly remember my days when, my father used to be quite devout, and we would celebrate festivals, and those impressions never go away. What you give your children now, they will remain. When they grow up and they have their children, they will want to pass it on. So we are creating a whole generation after generation of Krishna conscious children, you see. And I still remember, there used to be a huge Dashera festival they observe in Allahabad, that's where I came from. And we were living in the city, so all the floats would pass right there, down there. And as children, we remember just going through that, watching those floats. And my father, he had a special pole, so he would have the floats wait a long time in front of a house, so we would see them, because they go so fast and you can't really see them. And they would have all of them wait there. He had pole, a lot of pole, And I remember it was, and on the last day, he would take us to see Lord Ram and Lakshmani, the main characters, who were, right at the end of the float on a big elephant. And they would actually, the mood in India at that time was so devout, like they would practically worship Ram and Lakshman. And these people were so powerful actors, they would actually do drama for a whole month prior to the actual Dashera day. So these young people would actually get infused with a lot of bhakti, So there used to be a huge arti for them, and my father would take them. And I remember those impressions, they still remain. They were so effective. So we have to think like that. They are not in India, and those things also have died a lot in India, right? So we want to, and this is what Prabhupada's motive was, is to give this culture back to us, back to the people, not only just to Indians, but to everyone, because Krishna is not just for Indians. So he did that. He's trying to do that. And Prabhupada was so enthused about festivals. Like even at that old age, he was constantly working so hard to celebrate huge festivals in all these big cities, and making sure that devotees worked so hard to make this a success. And the idea was to bring other people, to bring the people who are not at all inclined to spiritual life, to bring them in. So we are working hard to bring people who are not devotees, to bring them and cultivate Krishna consciousness. And that was the purpose behind Rath Yatra. Prabhupada celebrated Rath Yatra in such a grand way and brought this. I mean, people cannot believe that we have Rath Yatra here, isn't it? You talk to people in India, and you show them pictures, they can't believe what Prabhupada did, actually. What Prabhupada did and he would try to be in every Rath Yatra festival. He would take so much pains to celebrate Rath Yatra.
So I just wanted to add that, especially in a smaller temple, where there's more room for interaction, we can try to think in terms of how we can center all of our activities, all of our preaching work and our temple programs, arrange them in such a way that the children are always front and center, that they're part of it, right? And it just takes a little bit of planning and creative thinking, and it works. This was one of the things that my parents did a lot in the temple in Boise, is that not just for me and my brother, but for all the young people, our whole generation that grew up, to make sure that every aspect of the temple's program was somehow connected to the children. So they were able to lead Sunday Feast Aarti, they were able to lead the Nasinga prayers afterwards, they would give presentations on special occasions for the lecture. So for example, on Mother's Day, for example, it's a topic that kids can, little older kids can easily relate with. And so they give some presentation about the importance of mothers and their gratitude for mothers, but connected somehow to the scriptures. Like my mother said, plays and dramas. Every preaching engagement that we went on, the children were always part of it, either because they were doing kirtan or they were helping to distribute books or they were cleaning for the festival, right? So there was never a sense of, well, what do we do with the kids now? And the only time that happened was during classes and so the adults could actually hear properly. Then the children would have their own Sunday school at the same time, like you do here. But the idea is that in every aspect of the temple, we can make sure that the kids are front and center, so that we're automatically training a next generation of leaders for that very same temple. And they will do that work themselves for their own kids. And this way, the movement flourishes and it grows very nicely. So they learn a lot. We benefit because actually over time, you get a lot of help. When the kids are a little bit older, they can take responsibility for different things. It takes a good amount of burden away from the adults. So they benefit, the adults benefit, and the temple benefits as a result of having a future generation ready, right? So in any kind of organizing or planning for the temple or any meetings or whatever, it's always nice to raise the question, how can we engage the kids? And the effects of this are so healthy for the temple itself. The interests of the temple are served because automatically the congregation and the devotees and the newcomers, everyone is inspired. Everyone is inspired to see the kids do so well. They think, I want my kids to be like that. I got to join this temple, right? I got to join this movement because I want my kids to turn out like this as well. And as soon as you have the kids involved in something, then the parents will be present, right? They will be involved as well. And so for attendance at festivals and temple programs, the key is get every child to do something. And then as soon as you have that, every parent will be there, and there's 2 parents per 1 child. And so your attendance is always maximum if you involve the kids. So it's just a really nice strategy to think of not, my service, the temple, and then there's the kids also, but to think of them in an integrated fashion.
So this is the most frequent. Yeah, this is the most frequently asked question, top on the list that I've been facing in all the seminars we've been giving.
This is why we leave it till the end, so people
Yeah.
stay for the whole seminar.
So yes, a very, very challenging one. So I thought it's best to see it from the perspective of Srila Prabhupada, what he thought would be the best way to discipline the children. And I did try to apply those things in my life. So Srila Prabhupada's formula for discipline was love. Okay, so he said that we should try. It's better to discipline our children through love rather than through punishment. Okay, so and of course the center of that love is Krishna. So when we actually focus on Krishna and we make him the center of our lives, then children automatically they learn good discipline. There was this wonderful quote by Srila Prabhupada. So this is the quote that Srila Prabhupada spoke on discipline, because when somebody wrote to him, in Gurukulas facing that problem, how to discipline children, he said, if we train our children by developing and encouraging their propensity to love Krishna, then we shall be successful in educating them to the topmost standard. Then they shall happily agree to do whatever you ask them. In other words, Krishna really, when we attract them to Krishna, then automatically the disciplinary issues become less. And I experienced that in my life, where if you, like I mentioned, how you start out with a morning program, whether it's a short one, it can be a 5-10 minute one, but you start out with the children with chanting and hearing, and then reading Srimad Bhagavatam any time of the day. These things, they cultivate in the children a saintly behavior. The children become very saintly, and because really if you want to change, discipline is a matter of changing their hearts, right? If they are being misbehaved, right? So the point is that we just don't want to impose punishment for them, because that really doesn't work, right? And Prabhupada would give the example of a thief. He goes out and steals something, and then he gets punished, and then he comes back and he goes back and steals again. And the reason is because his heart hasn't changed. His heart hasn't been purified, right? So in the same way, we all have these bad habits. We have, problems of misbehavior and all these things. How does that change? Is by changing the heart. And changing the heart means that we actually do devotional service. That's what changes the heart. So the more we engage, so we don't look for answers in punishment, because when we do that, then the children become a little rebellious. Like, you keep on punishing them in different ways, then they become immune to it, right? You've noticed that? How these punishments like time out and all that, okay, you have time out and you've been bad, so today you're going to stay and you're not going to go anywhere. And then they take it for granted, like, okay, they don't like it, they resent it, but it really, so these punishments should be taken very rarely, when things are really out of hand and you really want to make a point, then that's what you do. But on the whole, Prabhupada is suggesting that we actually solve this problem by developing in them this loving propensity, this propensity to love Krishna. Because this is what's going to purify their hearts, by keeping them engaged all the time. When the mind is engaged, you're out of trouble. The mind is the devil's workshop. So we have to keep the mind engaged. We have to think of different ways to keep them engaged. Okay. So because if we see, there's two things parents are prone to do, right? Sometimes you see parents, they become very lax. They allow the children to do whatever they want to, with no, they don't check them for anything. Now that's not good at all, because in this way the children become misbehaved. They lack self-esteem. Prabhupada said they lack self-esteem if you allow the children to do whatever they want to. Okay, and then if you become very, very heavy and punish them, then they become rebellious. So there has to be both love and good training. See? So Prabhupada said the children have to both love and fear their superiors. So there has to be plenty of love. And there's no dearth of that, right? We know all about loving children, right? We spend a lot of time with them. And in case we are not, we should. We spend a lot of time with them. We cook so much prasadam for them. We actually involve them in activities, Krishna conscious activities, and we help them in those activities. So we are showing our way, our sacrifice and our love to them, right? So the love is there, right? But then there has to be also good training. And the good training comes from, being a devotee, the self-control we've been talking about, different ways to control our senses, through Krishna consciousness.
So I remember one instance when I was small. I was my mother had a very nice way of offering both encouragement and being very strict, and she would use them alternatingly, both in very, very effective ways, both sides. So, for example, I remember the first time I spoke at this high school, the Bishop Kelly High School that my mother was talking about. She had asked me to give the presentation. I really didn't want to. I was very, very nervous, around 12 years old at that time. And I still remember I was standing behind the podium and holding on for dear life, and my knees were shaking and this voice was stuttering, and I somehow got through the 30-minute presentation and came out, and it was all over. And my mother said quite unexpectedly, she said, "Wow, that was really good. You're a natural at this." And I know I wasn't good at that point. It was a not very good presentation. but her encouragement just gave me a lot of confidence. And the wonderful thing about encouragement is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you tell someone they're really good, and they become really good, even if they aren't quite really good yet. And so there's that encouragement side. At the same time, we have to be willing to draw the line and be strict when needed. And she was also very ready to do that whenever necessary. One time I remember I was doing this correspondence course, Bhagavad Gita correspondence course with Sureshwar Prabhu. And it was, I was working on one of the Gita chapters, I don't remember which one, and answering the questions. And at the end, he'd have a couple of more thoughtful essay questions, trying to apply what we had studied in our own lives. And as I was sitting there trying to figure out an answer, I couldn't figure out what to say. And I kept complaining, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write. And finally, my mother got really upset with me. And she said, this is not right, you have to write something. And I'll give you 10 minutes, and when I come back, you should have written 5 pages. And I was like, 10 minutes, 5 pages, that's 2 minutes a page? I don't think I can even write that fast if I knew what I was writing. But she would not give up, you know, she was just like, and you know, like my mother said, I feared my parents also, besides loving them. And so okay, she said, I got to do it. I just started writing whatever came to my mind. And all of a sudden, good ideas started to come. And so it was my first experience getting over writer's block, which would be useful a lot later on in life because I now have to write regularly as part of my profession. And so, but you just do it, you got to do it. And when she came back 10 minutes later, of course I hadn't come anywhere close to 5 pages, but she didn't note that fact. She didn't say, well, it's not 5 pages, what are you doing? Instead, at that point, it was just encouragement, right? This is very good. See, I knew you could write it, just something was blocking you, but you can actually do the writing. This is really good. So she would alternate between strict discipline and plenty of encouragement as needed. And just being able to do that on a regular basis, right? Know when to draw the line and when to encourage. And when that relationship is there, the close relationship between parents and child, then just the desire to please the parents becomes a very powerful motivation to behave well, to behave properly. Because you don't need to, on most occasions, provide any kind of external threat of, like my mother was saying, punishment or timeout or something like that. Just the fact that mother or father is displeased becomes a really strong motivation not to behave in a particular way. Or the fact that they will be pleased or Krishna will be pleased becomes a very strong motivation to behave properly. So that's dependent on the relationship between mother and child and between father and child. And that relationship is a product of all of the things we were talking about up to this point. Namely, studying Srimad Bhagavatam together, doing morning program together, living a Krishna conscious lifestyle, preaching together, develops that closeness of relationship and that trust between them. So in other words, the reason we put discipline at the end of the seminar is, the real reason is because it's a full package. In other words, if we leave out everything we've talked about so far and then say, well, please give me some techniques to discipline my child, it's very difficult. It doesn't work. But when you connect what we've talked about so far, the full process of being together as a family of devotees, then the relationship that is built, these simple things of drawing the line, of being strict, of encouraging when necessary, of giving them a stern look. For example, most of the time, from my mother, especially from my father, that was sufficient, right? If he gives me a stern look, or he says 1, 2, and then you do 2.5, 2 3/4, 2. You learn fractions that way too, as we know. It's coming closer and closer to 3, which is the deadline. So that in itself was enough, right? That was enough. So it's a full package when it comes to discipline. Discipline is not a problem that can be isolated and treated separately, as if it's something you can take a pill for. It doesn't work like that. It has to be in the context of our entire life.
Yeah, I was thinking if there's love and trust and between the parents and children, really all you have to do is give a stern look, and the child should be able to do it. One has to develop that closeness where the child trusts you. There has to be, and all this that Radhika was mentioning, it comes by doing Krishna consciousness together, by being a part of your child's life in every activity. It comes automatically. One doesn't have to resort to so many other things. Because what happens in disciplinary issues is that together that connection is not there. It's not so firm. Like it's not so connect. We don't have that connection due to, lack of, just not being the children. Like I was mentioning yesterday, just having their own life, and parents have their own life. We see that so much, right? The children don't know how to mix with, parents, and the parents don't know how to mix it. They don't know how to connect. And we see that so much a problem nowadays. And all the problems in society is due to that. You can see how crucial parents are in children's lives, because when we lose that connection, they become a problem for society also, right? Because, I heard that, in Gurukulas, they face some problem for some time, right? And somebody told me that the children who were connected with their parents throughout this period, they actually were safe. They were able to not go through so much of trauma. And children who were disconnected with their parents for some other reason or whatever, they had more problems. In other words, this connection that we develop in our children is so important, right from the beginning, to work on that. And the only way we can work through it, Prabhupada gave us such a wonderful formula. This process of Krishna consciousness is perfect in every way. There's nothing lacking in it.
Just one more thing I want to highlight from what my mother already said, which is in terms of engaging children. And it's really, I think something like 75% of behavioral problems happen as a result of insufficient engagement for children. And by insufficient, it means that we're not engaging them, they're just running around doing mindlessly. But also, even if we are engaging them, we're not engaging them at a level that is challenging or interesting enough for them. Because sometimes we dumb things down for the children a lot, and they can be engaged at this level, but all we do is give them, something, Legos to play with, and then they look like they're engaged, but it's insufficient engagement. The mind is not challenged. And because the mind is not challenged, then an empty mind is a devil's workshop. It just becomes, it goes all over the place, and the children are dissatisfied. And so, assuming that the other needs are there, often disciplinary issues are a result of, they're hungry or they're tired or whatever it is, especially with small children. But assuming all of those things are satisfied, they're not hungry, they're not tired, and so on, then it's often a lack of engagement. And just by keeping a very full and engaged life, not just engaged in terms of a million different sports and activities, but engaged the mind. And this is again why it connects with study of Srimad Bhagavatam, because when the mind is engaged and satisfied, you can actually, they're much more peaceful, because the intelligence, remember, is always, according to the Gita, more powerful than the mind, and the mind is more powerful than the senses. And the senses are present within the body. So if their senses are going haywire and their body is running crazy, then we can get above that by appealing to their intelligence. And that's true for adults. We know this for ourselves. We can control our needs and our desires by using our intelligence. For example, we can fast by using our intelligence. But for children, it's true as well, but to a lesser extent. If we engage their intelligence, then their physical body and their needs and all automatically they fall into place. The other nice thing is that we can draw then on their intelligence at times on what they've learned and studied when their intelligence is not functioning properly. So, if they read Bhagavatam regularly, then, for example, with my kids now, they're studying Srimad Bhagavatam on a regular basis. So occasionally the older one will get really angry or upset. And then I just remind him, I said, look, you read in Srimad Bhagavatam how bad anger is, right? Look at Dhruva Maharaj when he grew up and he got angry at the yakshas and he was killing them left and right. And Lord Brahma came, he said no. And immediately he says that, you say that, and he remembers and he kind of calms down and he says, yeah, his anger is in the mode of ignorance. And then the funny thing is that when I get angry at him sometimes, he'll turn that around and use it on me. He'll say, Bhagavatam says you should not get angry. You're in the mode of ignorance right now. And it's good. It's nice because it's also a good reminder for me, that maybe I'm becoming a little bit too angry. And then I'll turn it around and say, well, but also Bhagavatam says children have to obey their parents. So let's go. So it becomes nice. You're operating at a different level, right? Instead of no, yes, no, yes, no, yes. And operating at that kind of mindless level, you're operating at the level of the intelligence. And we should not underestimate a child's intelligence. Their ability to understand things and grasp what is right and wrong, their desire to please Krishna and to please Srila Prabhupada, these are real things for devotee children. They really do want to please Krishna. They know Krishna in a more personal way, practically, than we know Krishna. And so when we ask them to make Krishna happy or tell them that Krishna is unhappy as a result of their behavior, then it strikes them. They understand that. They take it deeply inside, And of course, as they grow up, then the appeal to their intelligence has to become even more. When they're younger, sometimes you just do have to drag them into the car or whatever and just go. But as they grow older, it is that the ability to do that is less and less because they're now much stronger and bigger, and they have. But at that point, then it becomes even more important to appeal to their intelligence. But we shouldn't underestimate it. We don't have to wait for that until they become 13 years old. We can do that even for a child of 4 years old. We can appeal to their intelligence at their level. So we're going to go back to one slide that was in the wrong place yesterday. It actually comes here.
So this is another top of the list question is whether parents ask us is that whether all these restrictions that we have for our children, are they going to be bad for them, negative for them, because they will rebel against these restrictions later on in life when they are free. Just like Prabhupada gave the example of how in a hospital, when a patient is recovering, then the doctor says, don't do this, don't do that, don't eat that. But he's waiting to get better and eat those very things, right? So it's like that. So does it work the same way for devotees? Like you restrict them, and then as soon as they get an opportunity, they're waiting around? But Prabhupada said, no, that's not true. For example, Ekadashi, we fast from grains. But we don't, even though sometimes it may get austere, but because we have a higher taste of wanting to please Krishna, it doesn't work the same way. In other words, we are not just waiting to, get out of that and do the very things that we are not supposed to do. Why? Because Krishna is in the center, and as we do devotional service, we get purified. So just like material restrictions are necessary to keep the body sound, right? We always tell our child, you have to brush in the morning. These are some things. We restrict our children from going to bed very late at night for their own benefit, and so many other restrictions we have, not to play with matches. So these are all material restrictions, and they are good for the child because it keeps them safe and the body sound. So in the same way, spiritual life also needs these, austerities. And by doing these austerities, one becomes on the mode of goodness. From passion to ignorance, we come in the mode of goodness. And we all know that when we are placed in the mode of goodness by being a Krishna conscious devotee, then we become happy. So in other words, the mode of goodness naturally gives us happiness. So these restrictions, for example, restrictions of not watching TV or eating things that are not prasad, or so many restrictions we give. We take it for granted, right? But children, having been exposed to school, they may object to those things. So by giving these restrictions, we are giving them a foundation for good Krishna conscious happiness. In other words, later on when they get older, they'll really be thankful. But at the same time, we have to understand the restrictions that we are giving them, these restrictions that we are giving them, they are not really restrictions. They actually, because you're introducing them very early in their life, it actually becomes enjoyable. And they are not restrictions at all. Like, for example, we may have, it may be an austerity for us not to eat onions and garlic, for example, or to watch, not to watch movies that we've grown up watching, or giving up meat if we've grown up eating meat, and so many things, eggs and all that. It's, it's difficult, and we have to work on it for several years before we can give it up. But for children who've been never introduced to that taste ever of meat, eggs, or movies, is it a restriction? No, it comes natural for them. It's actually enjoyable for them. So in the same way, Prabhupada suggested, children that they, do some austerities. The only austerity that he recommended is that you do a morning program, and chant and dance. So now that restriction, once they grow up doing those things, they find it enjoyable. You see, they don't find it difficult. And Prabhupada wrote so nicely about how children in the Vedic times, they would, they were in Gurukula, right? So they were working for their guru, and they would go out to beg some rice for their Guru Maharaj, right? They would be out all day begging for rice, and they would come home, and they would, eat, offer their what they had, and they would sleep on the floor. And they were so happy. They enjoyed it, right? Because these restrictions were just part of life. They didn't see them as restrictions, but they found it enjoyable. So we have to introduce these things early in their life so that it's not a big deal for them. I remember we never had television in our homes. We always tried to, we always ate prasadam. We avoided non-devotee food. And it wasn't a big issue for them, for all of us, because if you don't ever turn on the television, they don't miss it. It was always there for, watching video shows, Krishna conscious video show, and it became a big thing. It was a special treat. But they never missed the television because you never just had it on. There was no signal there, by the way. We didn't have a signal. So it all worked out. So anyway, so and then in terms of, this connection between, as you get older, they become aware of the opposite sex, right? The boys with the girls and all these things. Now that instruction also, I didn't feel need of talking to them about that because of Srimad Bhagavatam. It was just, story after story talks about this, relationship between boys and girls, when it's good and when it's bad, It's good if we are raising a nice Krishna conscious family, otherwise it's not, it's bad, right? So we heard from Radhika yesterday how different stories are projecting about good connection with the opposite sex and when it is bad. So Bhagavatam was giving that training for them of how to deal with that, with that situation. So, I remember that I didn't have to face so much of these challenges of feeling that I'm restricting my. And a lot of people also complain, when they came to the temple, and they complain and says, why are you denying your children all these things? They should be exposed to that, because if they haven't experienced it, later on they may want it. But these very people, they became very surprised when they would see them so happy, with their happy faces, So, in other words, yes, there will be some criticism, but if you know why you're doing it and you feel strong in that, then pretty soon the results will be there. The results will be there. Of course, we don't need to be fanatical. We have to be careful, between fanaticism and practical Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada said utility is the principle. So we always try to adjust things accordingly to our own individual circumstance. But the basic principles are there. We should try to aim for that. We may be, struggling our way in, but we know at least there's no dispute about what we are trying to achieve. We don't dispute about, whether we should watch movies or not watch movies. Okay, so we know that watching movies goes completely against the principle, principle of following the four regulative principles, right? We know that. That's not debatable. However, we understand where we are at, and we don't try to, and other people may be at. We don't try to judge them, but we know what is best. So if we can raise to that platform, then we should do it with confidence. And we should train our children like that. Okay, there may be other people who may not be doing that. We treat them with empathy, with compassion, because after all, we are all in that process of getting there. But at the same time, we can actually follow it in our own life and feel confident about that. So if you give that kind of training to the children, you'll have lesser problems of them being affected by what the other children are doing, because we have that issue always, that even within the devotee community, there are children who are not following these things, right? So how do you train your own children to do these things? And again, it's a whole package. It's a whole package that we presented to you, in terms of feeding the intelligence through philosophy, examples of your own life, and also, just giving them the joys of Krishna consciousness. In other words, giving them the higher taste. You give them the higher taste, gradually the process of chanting and hearing is so powerful that even though the children may be doing those things, in situations where there's absolutely no way that you can prevent these children being to some extent in that kind of association. But at some point, if you have a strong Krishna consciousness at home, and through the process of hearing and chanting and reading Srimad Bhagavatam, at some point, they're going to rise above it. They're going to, you can actually save them. If you can actually do that, where you can have a life where they can, even though being exposed in that environment, you can keep them away from that and make that strong for them, that's wonderful, okay? But either in any way, we cannot give up this process that Prabhupada gave us. We have to have so much faith and confidence in what Srila Prabhupada has given us as a formula for solving any problem, and their minds not being giving them these restrictions in a way that is healthy. That's healthy. And the only way it's healthy is when you, alongside with these, you give them the joys of Krishna consciousness. The fun part, the wonderful part of Krishna consciousness. Then they are able to actually give up these things happily, you see. So the positive always have to be given at the same time,
So it's, I think it's important that we change in our own minds, change the idea from restrictions to good habits, right? So when we think of like brushing our teeth, for example, so we tell the kids, you have to brush your teeth in the morning before breakfast. Now, is that a restriction? But we don't think of it as a restriction. We just think of it as a good habit. This is good for you. You should do it every day. And you're not going to get breakfast until you brush your teeth. So in the same way, any of these things that we speak about, which is like eating only Krishna Prasad, for example, it's not a restriction. It's a good habit. And the nice thing about habits is that once you develop a habit of mind or a habit of body, then you don't perceive it as a restriction. Just like if someone has a habit of rising early in the morning, then it's not a restriction for them to rise early in the morning. It's just they wake up in the morning and they like to wake up in the morning. For someone who doesn't have that habit, who sleeps till 10 o'clock, then waking up in the morning is a real struggle. It's a restriction, it's a force. For our children, we have the opportunity, because they're young, to cultivate good habits of body and mind. And so, whereas something may feel like a restriction for us, because we may have gotten into it later in life, for them it won't feel like a restriction at all. It'll feel like something that is really nice, and it'll be natural. Now, many times people say, well, my idea is I want to give my children a neutral upbringing. And then I'm not going to push them in this direction or in that direction. I want to be neutral, and then when they grow up, they can choose. Do they want to be a devotee or they not want to be a devotee? The problem with that argument is that there's no such thing as a neutral upbringing for anyone, right? So if you say, well, I'm not going to force my children to brush their teeth. I'm going to let them do what they want, and when they grow up, they can choose. Should I brush my teeth or should I not? The problem with that is that by not telling them to brush your teeth every day, you are not choosing freedom. You are choosing rotten teeth, right? And by asking them to brush their teeth every day, you're choosing healthy teeth. Now, when they grow up and they become adults, they can choose to stop brushing altogether. That's up to them. But at least you have given them the foundations of good teeth, right? You've done your job. And so then it's up to them how they want to do it. In the same way, if we give them Krishna consciousness early, where people say, well, I won't give them Krishna because, or I won't ask them to, don't do this and don't do that, and let them play the video games, and why should I restrict? If you're not restricting them, giving them Krishna, then you are giving them materialism, right? There's no in-between. There's no neutral ground between Krishna and materialism, where it's not Maya and it's not Krishna, it's just something in between. There's no such thing. Krishna says, I have two energies, the spiritual and the material energy. And so we have a choice. We're the third, the marginal. We have a choice. You can be in the spiritual or in the material. So by not choosing the spiritual for them, we are choosing the material. We're not being open. We're not being neutral. We're choosing the material path. Now, when they grow up, they are welcome to choose their own path. Whether they want to be devotees or not, that will be their choice. But by giving them a foundation, you are stacking the deck in favor of their being devotees, right? If you teach them verses early on, you cultivate good habits, you help them worship the deity, then the chances are much greater that they will grow up to be devotees, because you've stacked the deck in favor of becoming a devotee. They could still turn out to be demons, but there's a smaller chance, right? But on the other hand, if we don't give them Krishna, then the chances of them becoming demoniac is much higher, right? Much higher. And the chances of their becoming devotees is much less. People sometimes say, well, I became a devotee and I ate meat my whole life or whatever. But yes, but how rare is it, right? We are, Bhagavad Gita says, we're one amongst 1,000, if not 1,000,000, who are able to overcome our past and become devotees. And frankly speaking, we don't even overcome. Every person who becomes a devotee, if we look back in our past, there are some samskaras that are present from our past, from our family, whether we're Indian or Western or whatever. There's some samskaras that are present from this life or from a previous life that come in. So we're providing a strong foundation, and then they have the freedom to do whatever they like. But we shouldn't come into this trap of thinking that somehow I'm going to let the kids choose, because it's not their place to choose yet. One day it will be. And once you've done the foundations, then you can be peaceful in mind. Okay, now, like Krishna says to Arjuna, Yatechasi tathaku. Now it's up to you. You can choose your path. I've done my job as a parent. And then we have to be detached at that point. But not being detached too early on is not good, because we have to guide them. That's our duty as parents.
One small thing is how people say that you are isolating your children from everything, right? So we call it insulation, not isolation, So you kind of, build this armor, through the devotional service, they become strong. And we actually, devotee children have such a dynamic life, such a versatile life that you won't find other children going through, because we expose them more, actually, because we are, we have so many activities, we are, we do so many, we are busy, we are busy, we do so much, in terms of book distribution, Harinam, festivals, Festival of India and Rath Yatra, and which child gets that opportunity, of being exposed to so many wonderful things. And of course, you travel with them to other temples, and, we try to do so much more because we are more connected with our children in terms of being one in purpose. You see? So...
I mean, if we isolate the children, the thing is that people worry about this point, and the argument is that, unless you expose them to something outside of Krishna consciousness and stuff, how will they know what the real world is like? But frankly, there are unlimited opportunities to know what the real world is like. Whether they like it or not, they're going to encounter the miseries of this world, right? And the temptations of this world and the pleasures of this world. They're going to get it all. You just have to drive down the highway and see the billboards. It's all around you. You go to a doctor's office and the television is running. They experience it, and when they grow up, they will experience it in full force, right? So we don't live in Satya Yuga where there's somehow if we keep children in the Gurukul, then they won't know what the world is like, and they'll come out for the first time and say, oh, that's a woman. I've never seen a woman before. That used to happen in Satyuga. There's stories like this, right? But it doesn't happen now. Right? We are just providing a little bit of protection. That's all we're doing. Even though it sounds, from the seminar, it sometimes sounds to people, oh, you're just going to stifle your children and keep them locked up. But actually, it's just a little bit of protection. And the material world will provide them unlimited opportunities for exposure. As they grow older, it'll be more and more and more. And all we're doing is we're trying to prepare them with the right attitude and the right eyes of scriptures and the right moral character so that they can face that when they actually come in contact. So just to conclude, we're going to mention some resources available for further study. I think a few of these things we mentioned yesterday already, so I won't go into them into much detail. But my mother has developed multiple resources to help parents. First of all, there's this book called Homeschooling Krishna's Children, sitting there, the pink one, that I mentioned last time. I think most people in this room have either seen a copy or have a copy themselves. But if they don't, they're available. Even though the book is called Homeschooling Krishna's Children, it's actually about Krishna conscious parenting and all the principles that we discussed in this seminar, plus many more topics and ideas that we don't have time for, as well as troubleshooting and common problems and frequently asked questions. These are all available in this book, Homeschooling Krishna's Children. So we encourage you to get a copy if you don't have one already. And then for people who want to study Srimad Bhagavatam with their children, as we would discuss in the middle part of the seminar, then my mother has put together a curriculum for parents and teachers who can use this at home, in Sunday school, in Gurukulas. And it begins with Canto 1, is complete in one part, 2 parts. Canto 1 is complete and Canto 2 is just out. And it'll be coming out soon. And what you have is you have a summary of each chapter written in a way that is suitable for children's understanding, and then questions to check their understanding, higher thinking questions for parents and teachers to use in discussion, arts and craft activities on the theme of the chapter, crossword puzzles, word searches, all kinds of fun things as well. And this has actually been created by mothers from all over the world. My mother has put together a team of people from different countries who have children of different age groups, who have created different activities, used it on their own children, and then refined them, and they bring them all together. My mother goes through each one of them, and they're compiled into this book. So these are all tried and tested from real parents, many of whom are teachers or child psychologists or people with a lot of qualification in this area. So it's really a nice resource published by Torchlight. And like I said, we have Cantos 1 in 2 parts available, and Canto 2 is almost out, Canto 3 is in production at the moment. Okay? And then also my mother is doing regularly a Srimad Bhagavatam study group for children that she does with many children, up to 100 children in any given week around the world, from places like Oman in the Middle East to the United States to India. And if your child would like to join one of these groups, you can talk to my mother. It's basically they read Bhagavatam together, and each week a chapter, and they discuss. And we don't have time in this seminar. My mother gives another short seminar on Bhagavatam study. We've covered the basic principles here, but there's all these nice recordings of, if you listen to the children's realizations sessions at the end, I've heard one of these before. It's amazing, young children, how many nice realizations they bring up after reading a chapter that we would consider philosophical. But children are so involved in it, and they're so inspired by the story and bring very deep realizations. So the best thing is for you to read together as a family. But this provides a supplement to that where they can come together with other children and read together as well. And then there's a homeschooling or a parenting group that my mother runs on Yahoo. And this is a place that she'll send occasional messages, but also others will send messages. If they're organizing a gathering for mothers, or if they need help in their particular area, or they have a new resource that they've seen. So it's nothing kind of structured, it's just a forum for communication that everyone can post to, and my mother is happy to answer questions there as well. And finally, she's also very open to individual communication through email, and her email address is listed there on the screen, and you're welcome to contact her through that. There's a lot of people contacting her. Sometimes the response rates are a little bit slower than usual, but she always does get back, and if you write a second time, she'll definitely get back to you. So we're trying our best to keep up with all of the requests, but you can write to her, or if you go to the Yahoo group, it's nice because then everyone benefits from whatever question or comment that you might have. Okay? So these are some of the resources that are available for you. The slides for this seminar itself, for those who have attended, are also available as a soft copy. Shatarupa Mataji has promised to circulate them to whoever has come. She has a soft copy of them, so you can talk to her and she'll send them to you. Okay? So it's already sent out for all the registered devotees. Good. So at this point, we want to once again thank those who were involved in organizing the seminar, particularly Shatarupa Mataji for her guidance and help in this, setting this up. And we want to thank Shyam Prabhu and Reena Mataji for hosting us here, as well as their family. And to the local temple management, Premananda Mataji and her husband, and all the other devotees who have been involved in cooking and setting things up and cleaning, and Vamshidhari Prabhu for doing all the electronics and the multiple eyes staring at us. So thank you all very much to them for their facilitation. It couldn't have happened without them. And then finally, many thanks to all of you who have taken out time from a very busy weekend to come here. I know there's a lot more, even in the Vaishnav community, happening this weekend in Chicago area. So thank you for coming, and especially devotees who have come from very far away, as far as St. Louis and other places, to attend the seminar. Thank you so much for coming, and all those listening online as well. We feel your presence in the air, even if we can't see you. So this actually went a little longer than we thought it would, this section, but we do have some time for questions. So at this point, the formal part of the seminar is over, but we are here at everyone's behest, however long is appropriate for the temple. We're here to answer questions. So we can start here.
Hare Krishna. So several times in the presentation you talked about actively engaging the child on the level of their intelligence, so talking to them where they're at. And so you gave the example of there's a difference between that versus giving them a bunch of Legos and then they're engaged but not mentally engaged. So how do we understand, because those same Lego blocks could be given to somebody who's just spacing out and just killing time versus somebody who's creating something. So how do we understand the symptoms of a child that's completely engaged versus physically, but everything else is checked out? So how to know that we're addressing them on the proper level?
I think as parents, we see the propensities and the nature of our child, and we respond accordingly. So for example, my older one, he's very much into construction. He says when he grows up, he wants to become a construction guy. So he loves building things and arranging things, taking things apart. So when he's engaged in that, you can tell that he's really, really engaged, you know, and he'll go with my father around the temple, and if he's fixing something, he'll help him fix it, and it's like a real thing for him. For my younger one, coloring was always like a full engagement. He's like somehow got this artistic tendency, and he'll color and may try to make it beautiful and work really hard at it, and get only a little done because he's so particular about it. Whereas the older one gets totally bored trying to do coloring. He just kind of spaces out. He'll do it, but he's not peaceful. So I think when we look at our children, we get to know them, we recognize what is their tendency and what absorbs them fully. And then whatever absorbs them, we encourage them to pursue that further and deeper. So they do everything and they develop at least a basic ability. Prabhupada wanted every devotee to have basic ability. Every devotee should be able to do kirtan, play mridanga, play harmonium, cook a simple Krishna prasadam meal, tell someone about Krishna, give a basic class, and we should all be able to do something at a basic level. But there's always going to be something that is really going to charge our child and push their buttons and help them grow. And when we find that, we know, okay, for this child, this is really something that's going to help stimulate them. But the process of scriptural study is really important because every child needs some intellectual stimulation up here, right? With some, we will find we can take that to a great extent. Like for some, it'll just be, something they really, really get absorbed in. And for others, less so. But they all need it to some degree. So it's an individualized thing. We find it as parents, and then we encourage them. We see how they're fully absorbed, and then we encourage them to build their skill and their expertise in that area.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. One of the things I have observed being in Boyji and then now being in Naperville, the Boyji, right from the beginning, the program was set up in a way that kids do participate at every activity, every level, depending upon their intelligence and capabilities. But in the larger temples like us here, where a lot of people have their own ways of engaging, that kind of thing we are not able to do. Here kids get separated, they do certain things or certain activities only, but then otherwise they are not engaged. And that sometimes looks to be the right, because what we have seen in Boyji, because kids learn everything, doing every activity, every way of leadership they learn. But here somehow we are not able to do. So how? But I wanted to know from you, in the context of the larger temple, how they are adopting this, because we have some of our challenges too. We can't just do the way Boyji is doing.
Every large temple is made of small communities, right? In other words, that with a small temple is just one small community because there's so few. If there's 10 families, then you're going to be one little group. But every large temple is made of smaller circles of devotees who are engaged in particular services in particular areas. So we may not be able to change everything in the temple in the way we want, but we can begin with what is our area of service, right? So whatever is your area of responsibility, or others in this seminar, we take that area of responsibility and we say, I want to try to transform this service that I do and somehow involve the children in this service. So of course there's limits on what you can do in a larger temple, and this is why we also need to try to do our home programs and bhakti rikshas and so on, so that we can give children leadership roles in those home programs and bhakti rikshas and so on. In a smaller place, it's more like, even in something like accounting, right? My grandfather will have Chaitanya count the dollar bills, and it's not worth a lot of money, so he can count all the pennies. So you have, I don't know if you have here, but you usually get a huge collection of coins and pennies at the bottom, right? So you get the kids to sit down one day and count all the pennies, and there's not much chance of stealing pennies, right? So they'll count, they'll learn honesty, it'll be fun, and they'll get involved. Even something like accounting, they can be involved, right? So we just have to think creatively, is how can I bring my children along in my service? And we can start with ourselves. Start in your own service, in your own circle of devotees, and naturally people will be so inspired to see the kids involved. They think, how can I do it in my area of service? What can I do to do it? So we have to set the example. We have to take the initiative.
Mataji has this volume 1. Would you recommend to start with that, or to start with Prabhupada's Bhagavatam and simultaneously doing this? How should we start? Wanted to ask you that first.
Well, we mentioned yesterday that you'd actually read directly from Srila Prabhupada's translations and do a discussion with them, and this way you'd cover the whole chapter like that, and then you would use that book
Okay.
for activities. And there's a lot of activities there. There's critical thinking and analogy activities, and so you can use that only after you've read the chapter with them
Okay.
and discussed it.
Got it.
Then they will be more understandable. You know, you'll be able to actually do them. You can do without them, but it's not so effective. Okay.
And my daughter, she's very outdoor person, like sports and all, like she would like that. So in context of what you were saying, trying to make them basic, but how do we make her outdoor activities more towards Krishna consciousness?
Yeah, yes. So, so one thing we can remember is that, first of all, there's one point that I forgot to mention earlier, is that we have to be careful in terms of how many activities we get them involved. Okay, so because we don't want them to get so tired from all these activities that they have no time for devotional activities. That's one thing. And so we can choose the type of sports which is more conducive to Krishna consciousness. For example, there are some sports that are so rough and so violent that it's, you know, the child will end up very tired, like football, American football. It's rough and it can be very tiring. There's a lot of practice that's needed. So instead of that, you can choose something more milder, you know, and that's easier to make it Krishna conscious, you know, because Krishna, you know, he played. He was always playing and active and, you know, swimming and playing ball, and maybe soccer is better, right? Soccer is a little, yeah. So Krishna, it's not like games are not part of, you know, Krishna conscious child's life. It is. But we always have to temper that with being practical. You know, in other words, first of all, not running their energy so low that they have no time, you know. Like suppose we want to engage them in swimming, that's nice. But then if they participate in one tournament after another one, then they'll end up just going through so much practices that it's going to leave them no time. Just like for adults, you know, if they are training to become into something very high-strung jobs, then it leaves them no time for Krishna consciousness. The jobs are so high-strung that practically it becomes impossible to devote your life. So we have to think that way, that actually our goal has to be how to, you know, they can become devotees, you know. And so we have to choose for them sports or professions which is more conducive towards raising them like that.
How old is your daughter?
6.
She's 6. Yeah, so at that age, Prabhupada says play is very good for children. Outdoor play is healthy for them. But he said too much competition, it is not good. It emotionally and physically drains a person to be too highly. So Prabhupada was not in favor of very intensely competitive engagement, that you have to be the best and this and that. But he said play is natural for kids, and outdoor activity and exercise is very healthy. So we have to try to balance and see. You know, I have one devotee friend, and his daughter was very good at swimming, and so she was doing more and more and more and becoming very good and got to the state championships levels and so on. But after a while, both the daughter and the father and mother, they realized that this was just too intense, too exhausting, that the possibility of actually having a career as a professional swimmer was next to nothing. It was very low, and yet her whole energy was being drained. And she was falling asleep in practically every other activity. She'd come to the temple, she'd fall asleep in class, and she'd just get so tired and constantly hungry. And then once they stopped that, and she still continues good physical exercise, they stopped that. She's a teenager now. And all of a sudden, she started to become a very good devotee and became very involved because she was actually listening and connecting, right? And what they didn't realize is it wasn't her fault as she was drawing away from Krishna consciousness. It was because she had no life left after, you know, the 3 hour in the morning practice and the 3 hour in the afternoon practice. It was practically the end of it. So we have to be very careful in trying to get that balanced.
We have to be careful also in terms of what type of association the child has in that area. You know, for example, you know, I remember, you know, feeling the need for physical. I put them in a soccer group with other children, you know, other outside children, and very soon, I mean, they didn't want to do it because there were bad language and all those things. You can't prevent it too much, but if you see something which will expose them more than the others, you try to avoid that, okay? Because ultimately we have to, you know, we can't, you know, expose our children unnecessarily for so much of those things. And then also we have to understand that when we engage our children in Krishna conscious activities, they can be engaged in many physical ways. And that becomes a great way of connecting with them and a great way to get them engaged. For example, my children were engaged in many different things, you know, like cleaning, you know, helping me cook or organizing, and all these requires a lot of physical, you know, and of course, what to speak of chanting and playing midanga, you know, and dancing, and so all these things, we cannot forget that part of physical activity for children, how we need to provide those more opportunities and do less of the other organized sports. You know, I would do just the bare minimum, what I felt was needed, and then rely more on these Krishna conscious outdoor activities, you know, or indoor, both. You know.
Okay. And the child who is moderately introvert, you know, like not opening up. So one of the theories that homeschooling will cause, you know, will not help her to open up with other people. So whatever you shared about public speaking, doing services in the temple, all, does it still apply to the introvert child?
Yeah, actually, homeschooling is so nice because homeschool children tend to be far more open and communicative with people of many different age groups and socially capable than school children are. This is just a fact, it's a reality. You see, we think that children in school learn a lot of social skills, but spending 8 hours a day with people of exactly your same age is not the real world. If you see in the real world, you have to interact with people of all different age groups and seniority levels, and that requires different social skills. One thing I've experienced as a university professor is that when my students come into the classroom, the generation of students that come into the classroom now have very poor social skills. They don't know how to relate to professors differently than how they relate to their classmates. They don't know how to make conversation with people who they have never met before. You know, two people will see each other, they'll both, you know, hi, and then they won't know what to say, and then they'll pull out their phones, and then they'll type something, and one person will get a call, and that's it, right? So there's the social skills are not terrific, right? But what homeschooling does is it puts the child in a multi-age, multi-relationship environment where people are of equal age, older age, younger age. You're out there in the world, and what this does is it provides the child with a very, very good social skills. And homeschoolers tend to be very comfortable talking to others and adjustment. The key thing about homeschooling is that there's practically, 3 hours a day are spent on a desk, 4 hours a day maximum. And the rest of the time is outside doing things, preaching activities, programs, sports, traveling to India, doing all kinds of things like that. So my own memories of homeschooling are not at a desk. They're outside, never in the home. That's what I remember most about my homeschooling. And you have unlimited opportunity because the day is yours. You can schedule it the way you want. And you get through the academics really quickly. So you don't have to spend too much time just staring at your navel. It's really an active lifestyle.
So so you can be really creative in homeschooling and you get more opportunities. For example, we were doing prison programs and taking our kids to prisons and doing a program once a month. So you know, the child gets exposed to so many things um, that normally, you know, another child won't. Because homeschooling gives that opportunity because there's so much time, so much time. You can develop a talent that you see in children, you know, like music. You have more time for that. So many things.
After the prison preaching program, I figured out really quickly I didn't want to commit a crime ever. It was so bad in there.
Just one last question. Is there any pre-requirement about the level of Krishna consciousness or level of sadhana the parents are doing in terms of not just homeschooling but also preaching to the kids or like co-regulatory principle or steadiness in sadhana? So if you can just shed some light.
You're asking particularly for homeschooling
Homeschooling, yes.
or parenting in general?
Yep, like preaching to the kids, sitting with them, doing
See, well, whatever we know about Krishna, whatever we practice, we have to give to our children. And even if we know a little bit, we just figured out we don't want to eat meat. We have to give that to the children, right? So that's the basic principle. Of course, if we become more advanced, there's a strong motivation for parents to become more advanced and steady in their practice, because if they become more advanced, they can give more to the children. It's a natural thing. But we should not wait to inculcate in our children these principles of Krishna consciousness because I'm not good enough. Even if we're not good enough, we know we have the support of Prabhupada's books. We have the support of other devotees, and these are good enough, right? So if we study Bhagavatam together, even if we're not advanced devotees, and even if we're not Bhakti Shastris and we don't, if we just read Prabhupada's books, they will benefit and we will benefit. And if we don't know, what does it matter? We will learn by reading Bhagavatam. We'll learn together. And that actually makes for a very nice teaching environment when there's collaborative learning between the teacher and the student. In terms of structuring the teaching, in terms of training the child, disciplining, the parents will always be senior to the child, right? You have life experience that the children don't. And that life experience will always put you at one step above. But in terms of philosophical depth or sadhana practice, we can learn with the kids, right? We can improve our chanting because we want to improve the kids' chanting. We can improve our study of scripture because we want to study Bhagavatam with them. And in this way, we grow and they grow. And that's very nice. We can't wait. We don't have the time to wait. If we wait till we become pakka in our spiritual life, it takes 5-6 years at least. By that time, the kids are grown up and their best years are gone. So what will we do? Will we sacrifice them wait around until we become good devotees? It's too late, you know? It's too late. If Krishna has given us the children now, we have to begin right away because they won't stop growing no matter how much we ask them to.
Thank you very much.
And because parents are natural teachers, we always have the incentive to get better, to advance, because the children become our incentive. We want to see that in them, so we will rise to that. So it becomes more inspiring for us to actually advance.
Some of the things my children, like, I identified some of their areas they are good at. But during the summer time, because they're closely with me, I'm not doing the homeschooling. It's kind of manageable because, they're seeing me for the whole day. But once they start going to the school, because the outside impact is there, how do we still keep them? I know the best is homeschooling, but within my circumstances, there I cannot completely transition. So what kind of encouragement so that the impact from the school is not carrying to the home and distract from them what they were doing or good at, like, from the school?
So the key is to do the same thing, right, as we're describing, to the extent that you can. when the children are going to school. So the same principles that we discussed. Nothing is different in homeschooling. It's just more of the same, that's all. So if you can turn off the TV, limit the screen time, if you can engage them in study of Bhagavatam together, you can't do it every day if they're going to school, so you do it on weekends, or you do it on a couple of weekday evenings together as a family. If you can't do the morning program because they have to run off to school at 7 a.m., then when they come back, do an evening program together, even if it's just for 15 minutes, right? So everything we spoke about, you do the same things, but just adjust, adapt in a way that is suitable for your children's lifestyle, right? So this is, we just have to be creative in adapting the situation and fitting things in so that all the ingredients that Prabhupada gave us are present. It's like a recipe. If you, the best is, you put the chunk at the bottom, and then you put the spices on top, and then you put the vegetables, and then you stir it around, then you add water. But if you can't do it in that order that Prabhupada gave us, morning program, this, that, then at least somehow put the ingredients in the pot, right? It'll still taste good. Even if the ghee comes later and the masala comes, it still tastes good, right? It may not be perfect. So that's the idea. It's so potent, the process, that we just have to find ways of including these ingredients in our children's life. Nothing is different.
That he's really good with reading. That's one of his skills. So I did on it so that he reads his spiritual books. So I identified some books and gives him some inspiration to do. Is there any, like, he's interested in biographies or autobiographies. I identified, but after that, like, it's not many. So is there any book list or collection which he could start reading from it? Doesn't need to be attached. But
Yes, how old is he?
he's 12.
He's 12. So I really enjoyed reading when I was around that age. The Six Goswamis of Vrindavan, he did that. Lives of the Vaishnav Saints by Satyaj, he did that. What about this Life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the seventh Acharya?
He's on. Wow.
Oh, excellent. So then he should keep reading every book you can find. There's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's biography. There's Chaitanya Bhagavat, is really enjoyable to read. Chaitanya Charitamrita, very short purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, mostly nice stories of Chaitanya. He can read that. That's a 9-volume biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He can read that. That's what I read, I think, next after these other ones. So if he's a good reader and he enjoys reading, then you should find these nice books and just let him loose. Oh, Prabhupada's Lilamrit. He's read all 7 volumes? Or the short one?
The short one.
The thick 1 volume. Excellent, excellent. Yeah. So keep him going. Just keep him going on all these nice books. And we can discuss afterwards. If you have a list of all the books he's read, I'll try to find some that he hasn't.
Next question is related to the festivals program. I managed do the service of festivals here, and some related questions which will inspire, or we could speak something from that which will inspire. One is whenever I say about the drama, the first thing from parents' side is, oh, my children have soccer. No, they have school homework, a lot of things. They cannot give up just because of your saying that things. And instead of encouragement, I see a discouragement from parents' side, and that is one question of it. And second is it if the children are presenting there? It's not going to be professional, definitely it's not. But is it okay? There will be some things, but sometimes I get the, no, this is not professional, so don't do it. So, little, if you could speak up a little bit on that. And the last question related to that is, kids, every parent.
Let's do one question at a time. Okay. So the drama. We face that in Boise all the time. Our plays are not professional at all, but our whole motto is to engage children, and actually the audience is accepts that, And gradually, as the children get more proficient in doing with that, then the plays get better and better. And over the years, we've seen a lot of improvement in our productions. So, but we have to engage our children, and it's better that we don't focus so much on being professional rather than giving them more opportunities. That's my feeling.
And parents are, if they're not into it, then you just find a few parents who are interested, and do the play accordingly. Even if with 3 children, you can do a nice play, right? The Scholar and the Boatman. It just doesn't require many.
That you are doing only the plays with only with these 3 children, not involving the others. Like I'm trying to, get where you could. My main idea is not to present what's happening in the center. If you could speak up how to, the parents get inspired so that they can involve their children. Not
what you can do is make an announcement at the Sunday feast that we're planning a drama for Janmashtami or whatever. Any parents who are interested should contact me or whichever parent is leading it, and send out an email to everyone. Let people respond, and then whoever responds, then you engage their kids. Once other parents see that these children are doing so nicely on the stage, they'll naturally want to get their kids involved as well. And every mother and every father wants to see their child on the stage. And even when the play is not professional, when children are doing it, everyone's ready to forgive it. In fact, they forget their lines and some mother says it from the background, then people find it really funny. So it's not a lose-lose situation. Now, it is a fact that some people will always complain that, oh, my kid was left out, you don't give the lead role to my child, instead the lead role always goes to this child. So that type of complaining happens, but you just have to pacify the parents, speak nicely and gently and kindly, and go on. It's inevitable.
From my side, the question was from my side, what can I do to encourage parents or involve kids more? From my side, what can I do? Like, should I conduct some seminar, or what can I do from my side? I put it in the wrong.
Just by putting on nice productions where the children are doing very well and they're enthusiastic and they're happy, others will be attracted to participate in it, right? So like I said, you make it open. You don't do it like secretly just by word of mouth. Make it open, announce it openly, and then just by seeing what is happening, the parents will want to be involved, and it will be really nice. You don't have to do anything extra. It's just you have the greatest attractant in the world. There's no greater force in this world than a parent's desire to see their child succeed. And so if you tap into that desire, by showing an example of good success, others will naturally, people will want to participate in the production. And like I said, there will always be some people who will complain, and you have to just pacify them somehow or the other. The next time I'll give your child a very nice role or something, and then you go on. But if in any school, anyone who's part of the PTA in school or a teacher in some school, they always know parents always have a tendency to complain about their children not being treated fairly or competing with other children. That's a natural thing. It just comes with part of the service.
One last question. So, like when senior devotees are there, kids tend to again at home we have to inculcate that culture living. But again, it's a transition. It's not going to happen. What steps we could do to make children in the class? Because when they hear from in the class today, when they're hearing, they're getting inspired. So again, any practical tricks to make them in the class
Yes, many times we want our children to sit in the class of senior devotees, associate with them. But if for that to happen, we have to cultivate good habits of listening consistently. See, if they're never attending class or sitting in class, and then a senior devotee comes and you say, oh, you must sit in class, they can't do it, right? They can't do it. But if we're training them on a regular basis, that every week, every 3 times a week, they're coming, they're listening to class nicely. And in the beginning, they can sit for 10 minutes, and then for 15, and then for 20, and we build their stamina. Then one day when senior devotees come, they will sit nicely and listen in class. Or if we train them how to associate nicely with our local devotees and how to serve nicely our local devotees, then when senior devotees come, they will want to associate and serve, right? So, oh, go take prasadam from Maharaj. Give him more of this. Children can serve, even for a senior devotee, they can serve nicely. But then we have to train them how to serve in a day-to-day basis. How to go serve your father, go serve your mother, go serve this Prabhuji who's here at the temple, right? So if we want that performance for nice occasions, for senior devotees, these super powerful moments of association, then we have to inculcate it in our day-to-day lives. Otherwise, it doesn't come just for the special occasion.
Hare Krishna. I really enjoyed your class. Actually, my question is more with regard to a little older kids, early 20s. So regarding my kids, I taught them whatever God consciousness I had at that time, whatever I was aware of. And I'm so grateful to Krishna that they turned out so far okay. But as I develop more, like in Krishna consciousness, and then I'm learning so many things, I have the desire to share that with them, and they are not even living with me now. So what do you what are your thoughts regarding parenting at that age, and whether it should be done or how it should be done, or what's the right to do?
Well, I don't have children of that age yet, so
I was
that's
hoping
right.
because you were college professor.
Yeah, so I'll try to draw on my experience as a teacher
Yeah.
for that purpose. And the thing is, I think the first thing to note is that they're not children anymore.
Yeah.
And so Prabhupada says, Chanakya Pandit says that after the age of 16, we have to treat them as friends and not as our children, not to be taught. And so at that point, then the main ways in which we can connect them to Krishna is the same ways that we would connect a very good friend to Krishna, right? So first of all, always being there for them and saying, look, I'm here, this is what I can offer, and I just learned this and I want to share it with you, right? And having that mood with them rather than the mood of a teacher is very attractive to a child of that age, because at that point, then you really do want, it's starting about like 25 or so, you really want to recover a close relationship with your parents. There's a period where you're kind of seeing the world and finding your own identity. But then at some point you want to retrieve that relationship and the closeness you had as a child, but you need a new way of doing that because you're not a kid anymore. And so the fact that you have a desire to connect with them in that way is really fortunate for them, because in that way they can retrieve a relationship with you, right? And so you can encourage them by tapping into that desire to spend time with you, but always making it in some way Krishna conscious, right? So I'm going here, I'm going to Sadhu Sangha or whatever, please come with me. Or when you come to the temple, let's do this together. And at the same time they're spending time with you, they're also engaging in some nice devotional activity. So that relationship of sharing your realizations and sharing in your services with them, it makes for a very sweet relationship between a grown-up child and a grown-up mother, and at the same time keeps them inspired in their Krishna consciousness. Yeah.
The time to set up these preaching engagements, normally people are in their offices between 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, and those are the same hours I'm homeschooling, and I'm really working hard to engage my children, coming up with teaching plan for other children. So I'm finding it very challenging to take out time to set up preaching appointments. Could you please share what you when you took out the time?
Yeah, so these preaching programs were generally in schools or libraries like that, daycares. So they all function during the day. So in terms of engaging other families during that time, well, fathers are at work. So, I mean, the mothers could come together and they could do the program. Or the fathers could take some time off, from work and come and join. And if you feel better about them speaking, they can speak. My husband would take some time off because it would be like once a month. So he would take some time off and he would accompany us and we would do the program together. So there may be many working mothers as well. So you try to find the families who don't have that issue or who are able to take time off. And of course, the children involved in this would be basically children who are not going to school at that time. Is that your question? No? No. Did I miss the question?
Yeah, the question is like the time for organizing these events. Like
Oh,
if
you
she
don't get
sets them,
time. Oh,
call them,
okay.
so on, that's the time when she's homeschooling.
Okay.
So then
Oh.
she has to take away from, how do you do both?
But this is homeschooling. I would gladly take time off from teaching them Bhagavatam or whatever subject and use it as that because this is education to take that time off. That day you give them a break, no homeschooling that day, or whatever you want to do, you do it in the afternoon. The amount of learning that goes on when you take them there and they are able to make small presentations is way much more than just sitting down and reading, you see. So don't feel guilty about taking time off from homeschooling. Being flexible in homeschooling is very valuable because this way you bring in a lot of, even if you want, bring in a lot of activities, but even if you're a structured person, like you want to structure things on, but still doing something spontaneously or different, it does something to the mind. It brings a whole new vision, a whole new excitement into homeschooling. So I had so many of these interruptions, just because we had a preaching center, there were things always going on, and because we were trying to catch practically every event in the city, there was a lot of interruptions. But I didn't see anything that the children were missing from these. In fact, they were adding more. They were getting smarter and more conscious of the world around them and how to see it in context of Krishna consciousness.
I just add that I remember my mother being on the phone for an hour in the middle of the day and, calling people and stuff like that. And she'd, often give us something to work on during the meantime, something less intense that we could do on our own, finish out a workbook, a couple of pages, or, even some arts and crafts or whatever. But she would, or it's the time to do our chores around the house. So she would give us something to do to engage, and then she'd make phone calls in the meantime, and then she would get back to our studies.
And also we were running a restaurant, and so there were children getting so many opportunities, serving and talking to customers. So all this is improving their vocabulary, their communication skills. So, don't feel bad about, doing all those things. Okay? More questions?
So, yeah. Well, we just got a signal from. Well, we then. Apologies to those who still have questions. Like Shyam Prabhu said, we're very happy to take them on an individual basis afterwards, downstairs or wherever there's facility. And so we just want to take this opportunity again to thank everyone very much from the bottom of our hearts for your hospitality here in ISKCON Naperville. And we hope to have your association again in the very near future. Thank you. Hare Krishna.